pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do my November book haul today, and I have quite a stack here, and plus 3 or 4 ebooks, and it's a little chilly, and the sun seems to be going down, so let's get started. Some of them I've talked about recently on either Friday Reads, or I've already read and reviewed them, so maybe it'll go a little quicker than I think. So the first one I just raved about, like a Princess Margaret maniac on my Friday Reads from earlier today. Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret by Craig Brown. Just getting started on it. I absolutely love it. It seems to be a perfect blend of irreverence and compassion might be too strong a word, but certainly sensitivity to the fact that, she's not just laughable. I will continue reading this one compulsively. It's brand new. This one will also be quick. This is The Key by Junichiro Tanizaki. I did a buddy read of this a week ago. I think it was just a week ago with Literary Prints, and absolutely hated the novel, which was such a disappointment after loving his masterpiece, The Makioka Sisters, but this was garbage. If you want to know more, please check out my review. I had a great time trashing it. This is one that I'm loving doing the 10 books tag and the page 112 tag because it's getting me more interested in my own TBR and making it more alive. All of which is to say that my second last 10 books tag, I talked about this book and then I bought it. Alina Bronsky, The Hottest Dishes of the Tartar Cuisine. I talked about it 2 10-book tags ago, and it got me. And then I found out Amazon Japan had it in stock. Most of the English books you get from Amazon are from marketplace sellers, and they usually come from Book Depository or somewhere from abroad. But this one was in stock in Tokyo, so I couldn't pass it up. As I said in that 10 books tag, this is a story about 3 generations of Russian women in the Soviet era. I assume it's like maybe set in the 70s or 80s. And the grandmother is, the leaves are falling, autumn has come. The grandmother, she's young at the beginning when her 17-year-old daughter gets pregnant, and she doesn't want to be a grandma, and she tries to convince her daughter to have an abortion, but her daughter gives birth, and then the grandmother falls in love with the granddaughter, but still hates the daughter, and that kind of family dynamic, and they eventually get out of the USSR when granddaughter at the age of 17 gets mixed up with a dastardly German cookbook writer. And somehow the grandmother finagles exit visas for the 3 of them. Sounds like it sounds really interesting. I don't know whether I'll like it or not, but I'm really, really curious. I might try to fit this one in. Alina Bronsky is a Russian-German writer, and I believe she wrote this in German. She lives in Germany. Yep. So this is translated from the German. So I will let you know how it is, but I'm quite excited about this one. As my daughter Sophia was explaining that she was pregnant, but that she didn't know by whom, I paid extra attention to my posture. I sat with my back perfectly straight and folded my hands elegantly in my lap. Yeah, that first paragraph is a keeper. Next is a gay novel from 1990s, I want to say. 1995. Tim and Pete by James Robert Baker. I remember this novel. I probably even owned this novel at some point. Could be in a box in Canada. But it was recommended quite highly on Litsy by one of my Litsy buddies there. So I tracked down a copy from Amazon, from the internet. It's one of the definitive U.S. AIDS generation novels. So listen to the first paragraph. I was having a dream about Pete. We were at his old place in Venice Beach in the bright, messy living room. We were arguing the way we had toward the end in real life. But this time I was living there with Pete. I'd moved into his bungalow, and even though we were both angry, I could tell we still loved each other. And suddenly we stopped arguing, and there were tears in Pete's eyes, and the next thing I knew we were making out in this horrendous, cathartic way, kissing deeply, which we'd never done in real life. But this was a dream, so we didn't have to think about saliva. Okay, that's the second time I read that, and actually I almost started tearing up because I just finished The Heart's Invisible Furies and reviewed it yesterday, and so it kind of took me back into the emotions of that. But this is actually a pretty powerful paragraph. I think more so than when I was reading it kind of in a hurry to prepare to do this video. But yeah, there's a lot in there. So I hope I like it. Next is a Japanese novel I couldn't resist picking up at the bookstore here in Tokyo. Slow Boat by Hideo Furukawa. I was attracted to it because of the cover, and it's a little novella, and it was like $10. But also, I'm very interested in this writer because I read his memoir last year. I am preparing, I probably won't get around to making a video of this until the new year, but maybe before then, of Japanese books that I've read that I would recommend, rather eclectic recommendations. And one of them would be his memoir, which has the wonderful title, Horses, Horses, in the End, the Light Remains Pure. And this is his memoir of the tsunami. He was living in I can't remember if he was living in Tokyo or Osaka when the earthquake and tsunami hit, but his home is in Fukushima, so it's his memoir about going back there. And it's not your typical kind of trauma memoir. It's really deep, and he ties it really intricately and mystically in with his earlier novels, which haven't yet been translated, but I loved this enigmatic memoir. So that's why I picked up Slow Boat. And Slow Boat, from what I can tell just by scanning the back cover, is about a young man who's trapped in Tokyo. He keeps trying to leave, but he can't get out of Tokyo. So maybe this will resonate for me. I've never made it out of Tokyo. I can't tell you how many times I've asked myself if the boundary is real. Of course it's real. And if you think I'm lying, you can come and see for yourself. I'm working on the final plan today, for the last time. The boundary isn't a border, but just because you don't need a passport doesn't mean you can up and leave whenever you like. This is where I was born, and it's where I'm going to die. This is my botched Tokyo exodus, the chronicle of my failures. Well, interesting, 125 pages. This one is thanks to Curtis of Curtis Books and Films. He talked about it on his channel, and I almost immediately ordered it. Morphologies, Short Story Writers on Short Story Writers, edited by Raw Page. I was so excited when I heard about it because... Oh my God, is he cute? What was I talking about? I have been looking for a book of essays by short story writers on the short story farm. I don't want to read a book written by academics. There's quite a few of those out there, but I want to study, if that's the right word. I want to acquire more vocabulary to talk about short stories and why I do or don't like them, and what it is about them that works or doesn't work. God, I wish I had a camera. He's really cute boy. He's maybe 18 or 19, wearing a tracksuit. The one I was drooling over, and he's bouncing a soccer ball off his head and dancing, and he's bouncing it so perfectly. Ah! I need 2 cameras. Okay. So this sounded like exactly, and I think it is exactly what I was wanting for that purpose. The only thing that was maybe disappointing or just surprising was the short story writers are all old, like with an essay on Nathaniel Hawthorne's short stories by Sarah Maitland, or Edgar Allan Poe's short stories by Sean O'Brien, Dostoevsky stories by Jane Rogers. I see there's Ali Smith on the short fiction of James Joyce. A novelist I quite admire, I quite like, Simon Van Boy on F. Scott Fitzgerald. So these are really canonical but old writers, so I don't know if it'll be as useful to me in what I wanted it for, but I'm still going to read it or try it. So thanks, Curtis, for the recommendation. Have you ever seen anybody? He's like juggling not juggling, he's just bouncing the soccer ball off his head, and it's wonderful, but is this a new thing? Oh my god. Dare I? Even if I turned it around, there's trees you wouldn't really be able to see. But anyway, let's keep going. I think this is the last brand new book that I got, and it just came to the mail the other day. Happy by Nicola Barker. This was the winner of the Costa Prize. I've heard it reviewed very enthusiastically by certainly Eric and I believe Peg. I can't remember if Peg had read it when she talked about it, but anyway, I've heard really good stuff about it. I guess it's a very experimental work. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, so I'm very anxious to try. The font and coloration is interesting, so I'm going to read you the first paragraph. I don't know if you can see the different colors, and this is kind of a post-dystopian novel, and the details have already gone out of my head, but let's just read the first paragraph and see what you should think. After they banded together and saved us from the floods and the fires and the plagues and the death cults, the altruistic powers actively discouraged the young from thinking about God. We walked a new path. They called it the new path. They called it a path of light. And the young were taught various simple techniques that allowed them to feel at peace. We moved beyond God. We were taught to celebrate this moment. And our chemicals were balanced. Okay, the last half of this haul I'm going to do more quickly because I'm just looking at the time here. These are used books I picked up a week or so ago, all in this really good condition. The End of Days by Jenny Erpenbeck, translated from the German. This is similar to, in theme or structure, to Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. Although right on the back it says, if you think this sounds like Kate Atkinson's Life After Life, think again. Well, I'll read it and tell you, but I love the opening line. It stands alone. The Lord gave and the Lord took away, her grandmother said to her at the edge of the grave. I want to go ask him if he'd mind me videoing him. I don't know if I have the courage. This was quite a find. Panchlight and Other Stories by Paneshwar Nath Renu, a Hindi writer and not well known in the West at all. These are stories of poverty, ignorance, and helplessness, superstition, and exploitation in Bihar, which I guess is a province in India. He's one of India's most prominent Hindi writers. I've never heard of him. The opening lines of the first story didn't really stand alone, and I won't take the time. But look, I can't remember. Was it somebody on BookTube that was talking about this book? Amsterdam Stories by Neskio, a Dutch writer. I thought it was either here or on Litzy, and I went back to Litzy, and nobody's talking about it there. So somebody was talking about this. Please identify yourself. Anyway, I couldn't believe I found a beautiful used copy of it. Neskio is a pseudonym for a guy, J.H.F. Gronlow, who was a very successful businessman and father of four who wrote these stories on the side. His writing career was from 1909 to 1942, but he didn't write really anything in the 20s or 30s. Listen to the opening, the first one, The Freeloader. Except for the man who thought Sarfatistra was the most beautiful place in Europe, I've never met anyone more peculiar than the freeloader. The freeloader you found lying in your bed with his dirty shoes on when you came home late. The freeloader who smoked your cigars and filled his pipe with your tobacco and burned your coal and peered into your cupboards and borrowed your money and wore out your shoes and took your coat when he had to go home in the rain. The freeloader who always ordered in someone else's name, who sat and drank Genever like a prince at the outdoor tables of the Hollandaise on other people's tabs, who borrowed umbrellas and never brought them back, who heated Bavinck's second-hand stove until it cracked, who wore his brother's double collars and loaned out Appy's books and took trips abroad whenever he'd hit up his old man for money again, and wore suits he never paid for. Okay? See how that goes. I love Rose Tremaine based on one novel only, and that was the Gustav Sonata. And I found this used, and it's in perfect brand new condition. This is a novel set in Paris. 13-year-old boy living with his mother, who is translating the latest medieval romance novel by a Russian emigre writer. And it's the story of the relationship between them. This one really intrigues me. This is a gay novel, African-American gay novel, B-Boy Blues by James Earl Hardy. I had this book on my shelf for years. It's probably in a box in Canada. And I found it for $2 and picked it up again. What's love got to do with it? Tina ain't the only one who feels that way. She has a soul sister in my very best friend, Eugene Jean Roberts, a native Virginian who bears more than an uncanny resemblance to Arsenio Hall. Jean is what you'd call a certified cynic. He is skeptical of everything and everyone. He does not believe in anything that he cannot see with his eyes, touch with his hands, smell with his nose, taste with his mouth, or hear with his ears. Which, of course, rules out God in all three of his manifestations. This also 86's love, even though he did believe in this once. Has anybody read it? A seriously sexy, fiercely funny, black-on-black love story. Another NYRB book, To Each His Own, by Leonardo Sciascia. That's the pronunciation according to the internet. What a wonderful sounding name. Sciascia, Leonardo Sciascia. But I didn't look at this one very carefully, so Peg, this is one I might put in the mail for you. I think I will try it, but this is a mystery. It's a detective story. I didn't know New York Review Books Classics published mysteries. Ooh. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Enigmatic opening, though. The letter arrived in the afternoon delivery. As usual, the postman laid the party-colored sheaf of advertising circulars on the counter first. Then, carefully, almost as if there were some danger of its exploding, the letter. It was a yellow envelope. A small white rectangle bearing the printed address had been pasted on it. "I don't like this letter," the postman said. The pharmacist glanced up from his paper. He took off his glasses. Bored, but also curious, he said, "What?" "I say I don't like this letter." With his index finger, he pushed it slowly across the marble counter toward the pharmacist. Okay, this one, again, my eye always gravitates to the books that I'd never heard of the title or the author, so I got this one, a collection of short fiction out of Singapore. Noon at 5 o'clock, the collected short stories of Arthur Yap. It's a very attractive little book. I kind of smiled when I flipped through it. There's a foreword and a preface and an introduction to the short stories. And after the short stories, there's another essay and then appendices. So the actual short stories are 8. There's 8 short stories totaling less than 30 pages. And why didn't I do a page 112? I usually do that. So here's the opening. The sun seems to dazzle everything it touches, and however acclimatized, no one can be impervious to its seeping heat. He was going home, and suddenly he felt sick. Perhaps it wasn't very wise to have walked that distance under the noon sun, but this is one of the things one does, without having to see if it's wise or otherwise, that is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to make Sean the Book Maniac history and do an on-air bail. No. I feel bad. I assume it's just bad translating or an unlucky opening paragraph, but that is crappy writing. Anita Bruckner. This is her novel called The Debut. I don't know anything about the novel, but I have a feeling I'm not going to like Anita Bruckner, and I want to find out for sure. What little I've read of her, I think I tried one of her novels about a decade ago, and I found I didn't like the writing. again, that whole Latinate thing, and I bailed. Even though back in those days I wasn't such a bailer, but I couldn't finish it. What's the one that everybody talks about? I want to try that one, but I found this one for cheap. It's about a book-loving scholar devoted to the study of Balzac. We'll see about that. But I don't mind the opening lines. They don't turn me off. Dr. Weiss, at 40, knew that her life had been ruined by literature. In her thoughtful and academic way, she put it down to her faulty moral education, which dictated, through the conflicting but in this one instance united agencies of her mother and father, that she ponder the careers of Anna Karenina and Emma Bovary, but that she emulate those of David Copperfield and Little Dorrit. Now that I've read it a second time, I know I don't like the prose. It's very stiff and formal. I will try it. Please weigh in. What do you think about Anita Bruckner? Do you think I'll like her? Do you like her? The last book, a physical book, I also picked up. I think I paid about $7 for it, but it's pretty new hardcover. Bending Adversity, Japan and the Era of Survival by David Pilling. He used to be the Japan correspondent of the Financial Times, and this is his book on Japan, especially post-earthquake and tsunami. I've heard a little bit about it, and it could be interesting. I'm sure there'll be things in here that I don't know. There's lots about Japan that I don't know. So to finish up, I've got a few ebooks to talk about, and then I might summon up the courage to ask that guy if I can take his video. So ebooks this month that I purchased. One was Gacher Gochar by Vivek Shambag, and I just did a 5-star review yesterday. Please check it out. It's wonderful. In my newest 10 books tag, I talked about The Book of Forgotten Authors by Christopher Fowler. I saw it, I heard him interviewed on a podcast. I'll put that link in the show notes again. He has written a book about authors who've disappeared off the cultural radar. It's kind of a where are they now type of book. It sounds really interesting, and the interview made me buy the ebook. One that Simon Savage recommended on an episode of The Readers. I think he recommended it on an episode before I even started listening to the Readers podcast, because once I discovered the Readers podcast, I went back and listened to the entire archives that was available through iTunes, and one of those old episodes, Simon raved about this Irish novel that was gay themed called Hawthorne and Child by Keith Ridgway from 2013, and it's about a pair of detectives, and one of them has a secret gay life, and it can't help but spill into his daytime working life. And he said it was really interesting, and I've always remembered it. Finally bought the ebook. Fortune Smiles, a collection of short stories by Adam Johnson. This was a 5-star read for me, and I will talk about it in my wrap-up coming in a day or two. And I did it on audio, but I decided, since I found the ebook was so cheap, that I wanted to have it to use for doing quotes and making sure there weren't things that I was missing. And sadly, Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kar Jaswal. I was very excited about this in, I forget if it was the 10 books tag, and I was all set to do a buddy read with Claire Reads Books, and I read the first chapter of the ebook and absolutely hated the writing. It just read like chick lit. Like there was just no literary value to what was to the writing at all. That was a chapter 1 bail. I was disappointed about that. Simasen.
はい。
すいません、上手。
いやいやいや。
写真いいですか？
あ、はい。
大丈夫？
はい。
だ。
それは。
大丈夫？
大丈夫です。
すいません。いや、お願いします。すごい。 ありがとうございます。珍しい。
そうですね。
何歳ですか？
20です。
ああ、僕も。
ほんまですか？絶対です。
ありがとうございます。That is my November book haul. Thanks for watching.